All right, it is 12 p.m. Central, so we are going to get started with today's webinar. We are very excited to present Evolve's third webinar presentation, Clicks to Conversions, Expert Tips for Building Winning Google Ads Campaigns. We have a wealth of knowledge here for you today. If you do have to hop off early, we will be sending out the recording and the slide deck via email after the presentation within the next week. Before I dive into our agenda, I would just like to start by introducing today's presenters. I am Shannon Turner, the Partnership Strategist at Evolve Systems. So it's my job to help our partners, prospects, and network be connected with the expertise that we're able to provide in helping people build their marketing goals. Today, we also have Joey Kaufman, who will be doing the majority of the presentation. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Joey.
Yeah, thank you. So like Shannon said, my name is Joey Kaufman, and I've been running the ads department at Evolve Systems for over 3 years now. I'm very fortunate to be active in digital advertising at a time where a lot has changed. I mean, really a lot has changed in digital marketing as a whole, but especially with digital advertising. And I've had the opportunity to work with clients in a lot of different industries on both the B2B and B2C side. So I've made a lot of mistakes, had some good wins, and I'm excited to share some of that with you all.
Thank you, Joey. So I'll go over today's agenda pretty quickly because we have a wealth of content to go through here and I don't want to cut short on our timing. But Joey is going to be imparting his knowledge on all of us for setting expectations for digital advertising. We'll do a deep dive into the Google Ads auction and how that works. We'll walk through the components of a successful Google Ads campaign, as well as the benchmarks, KPIs, and conversion tracking. And then we'll go through some advice that Google doesn't want you to hear. Lastly, we'll follow up with that question and answer session so we can pick Joey's brain. The chat will be open during this conversation if you have any questions, but I do ask that you hold them until the end in case we happen to walk through that content in the middle. Without further ado, I will pass it off to Joey.
Lovely. Okay, so I guess first, just setting the stage as context, really my goal with this webinar is not a step-by-step tutorial to teach you how to set up a Google Ads campaign per se. It's really to change your perspective on not just Google Ads, but digital advertising as a concept. Google Ads is the hook for this specific webinar, but there's a lot of similarities across platforms, and a lot of the things that we're going to discuss today can also apply for those other platforms as well. And we are going to dive into some of the more technical aspects of what happens behind the scenes in Google Ads. So hopefully you can pull a couple of those insights from our time together and apply that to your own Google Ads account. So like Shannon said, we're going to start with setting some expectations. I think it's good to set the stage before diving into some of the technical details, because I've noticed that there are a few misconceptions about what ads can do for you, what they can't do for your business. And I think it's important to set the stage here first. So we're going to first touch on what digital ads can do. One thing that they're really good at is driving immediate traffic to your website or Google Business Profile. If you just made changes to your website, you want an influx of traffic, Google Ads is really good at getting that traffic to the point that you want it to go to. It's also great at supplementing or accelerating other marketing efforts like SEO, although there isn't evidence of a direct link between Google Ads and ranking in search results. We do know that there is an indirect correlation because traffic and quality scores of users on your website actually can influence your appearance in search results. So a lot of the times, if you invest time into SEO, you can actually kind of accelerate the learning process or the appearance in search results by driving Google Ads traffic to the website. It's also really good at targeting specific audiences and subsets of users. Google Ads gives you the capability to target users based on their search intents, their behavior, demographic information, what they're in market for, and you can even do remarketing. So you can put remarketing tags on your website, as I'm sure many of you know and have done before. And you can actually retarget and deliver ads to users who have visited your website, which is a really powerful tool to capitalize on. It can also provide measurable results for data-driven decision-making and ROI analysis. I think this is a big one because Google Ads isn't just an advertising platform. It's also, in essence, a reporting platform. You can get a lot of real-time data on what's going right, what's going wrong. Real-time feedback is really valuable for any aspect of marketing, but especially with Google Ads when you're spending money every day and you really want to capitalize on that. And you can take some of those measurable results and learnings and apply it to other aspects of your website marketing mix, which is really valuable. And then finally, it can boost sales, leads, foot traffic quickly. And I put an asterisk by that quickly because there's a caveat with that. Yes, it's really good at doing it faster than some other marketing efforts like SEO, but it can't do it instantly. And that's kind of where we transition to the setting expectations on what digital ads cannot do, on the other hand. And this top one ties in directly with what I was saying with that asterisk. It can't boost sales, leads, or foot traffic instantly. It can do it quickly, faster than a lot of other marketing efforts, but it's not a quick win. You can't flick the switch and expect that the next day you're just going to get a bunch of leads or a bunch of sales, because it doesn't always work that way. It does take a little bit of time, so it's not an instant gratification. It also doesn't guarantee profitability. So the farthest that it can really go for most people is revenue and getting a return on ad spend, but it doesn't take into account other expenses, doesn't take into account margins. A lot of the times, advertisers are going to aim for about 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 return on ad spend, not because that's what is a good return on ad spend looking purely from a Google Ads perspective, but that takes into account business expenses and actually making sure that you are profitable. That's why you need that 400%. So it can't guarantee profitability per se. It can't compensate for user experience gaps or any deficiencies elsewhere. If your website is slow, if it doesn't resonate with users, you can't really use Google Ads as a Band-Aid fix. Now, it's not to say it needs to be perfect, but it at least has to be good enough. And if you think that your website experience is poor, Google Ads isn't really going to move the needle as much as some other efforts like improving your website, for example. It also can't replace other marketing initiatives like SEO. It occupies a very specific niche and it works really well together, but just like other aspects of marketing works really well when it's a team effort, right? When different channels work together, different efforts work together to kind of be a part of a broader strategy. So it's not a replacement for these other things, it's a supplement, it's a complement to it. And finally, it can't force a round peg into a square hole, which I think is really important to highlight, because on the surface, it seems common sense, but really when you apply it to your own circumstances, it gets a little more nuanced and you might be surprised by it. But what I mean by this is that, for example, you're not going to be able to sell milk to people who are lactose intolerant. It doesn't matter how good your Google ads are, that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to sell bread locally if you're in Minnesota and you're marketing to people in Hawaii. That's just not going to work. It can help with things. It can put the ads in front of the right users at the right time, but it can't force a round peg into a square hole. So those are just some of the expectations that I want you to keep in mind as we continue the conversation here. So now I want to talk about mushrooms. I think this is just a fun little segue into more of the technical aspects of this presentation, but I don't know if any of you have seen any posts on social media. I like browsing Reddit a lot, and one post that I frequently see is some users send pictures of mushrooms growing through their floors. And one of the common questions they ask is, can I just cut the mushrooms down? Can I remove the mushrooms and the problem, will it go away? And the answer is always no, because the thing is that these mushrooms did not pop up overnight, right? It's a result of months of mycelium growth. Mycelium is the actual organism. The mushrooms are just the fruit. So it's actually the result of months of hidden mycelium growth beneath the surface in your foundation. It spreads quietly through your floors, whether from humidity or water damage. And so by the time you see these mushrooms, it's not just a surface problem, it's a sign that something much deeper is going on. So if you remove these mushrooms, all you're going to do is just really release spores and just pave the way for more mushrooms to grow. The entire foundation of your home might be compromised and would need serious attention here. So digital ads are like those mushrooms growing out of your floor. And ultimately, tying it together, here's the morale of the story. I would like to take credit for that pun. I can't. That was my colleague Shannon's addition to the presentation. I was so close to it. I was one letter away. But I appreciate Shannon for adding a little flair to it. But the morale of the story is that it takes time for your Google Ads campaigns to bear fruit. Ultimately, it's all about hidden growth. So just like the mycelium that spreads out of sight for that are facilitate the mushrooms appearing. The success of digital ads starts long before you actually see conversions and see sales. Really, it represents the careful planning, strategic keyword research, testing, failing, everything that happens behind the scenes to build a solid platform. And the beautiful thing about that is if you invest that patience and that care to develop that solid platform, then it's going to be incredibly easy to not only kickstart new campaigns, but improve old ones because that solid floor and foundation is there. So it's important that you carefully monitor, you have consistent care, you optimize your campaigns so that they can bear fruit just like mushrooms can. And really that is tied into full funnel optimizations. One thing I said was that Google Ads can't drive sales, they can't get you conversions instantly, but they can do it quickly because it needs a little time. But your campaigns won't simply improve because of time. It's really a means to an end, right? That time is needed to actually do those full funnel optimizations. It's not just, you can't just set it and forget it and flip the switch and hope that 3 months down the line things will be improving more, because that's not how it works. So assuming if you have a train to catch or something and you have to leave, I wanted to include a little TLDR, too long didn't read, but really it's a too long didn't watch of the webinar of what you actually need to build a winning campaign. You will see immediate results without a doubt if you have a strong product or service offering, a unique selling proposition from your competition, your ad copy and creative is relevant and effective, your website is intuitive and optimized, and you have good landing pages, your targeting is accurate and it's reaching the right users at the right time in their journey, and you have enough of budget to accelerate that learning period. And finally, you have to make sure that your sales cycle is efficient and effective. And if you have all of that, then you will see results. But like I said, the caveat is that nobody has all that figured out at the start. The reason I can share this with you and feel that I have job security is because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of experimentation to get to that point. And that's really where Google Ads and the full funnel optimizations come into play. In the same vein, if on the other hand, your product or service sucks, you don't have a strong value prop, your ad copy and creative is weak, your website is unoptimized, slow, hard to navigate, you're targeting the wrong subset of users, you're underspending, or there are gaps or inefficiencies in your sales cycle, then you could never see results. It's not uncommon to see, we inherit some accounts, or we either audit an ad account from past clients and we see that, an entire year can go by and no conversions are recorded. And you may think that it's impossible, but it's really not. There's no guarantee of success if you invest money in Google Ads. Really, you have to put in that effort and that work to get to that point. And the fact of the matter is that the winners in Google Ads spend just as much time outside of the Google Ads platform as inside of it, because there's so many pieces that go into it and so many elements that are key to making sure that your digital ads are successful. Okay. So with that out of the way, just kind of setting the stage, next is actually diving into getting a bit into the weeds, more specifically the Google Ads auction. For those of you that don't know, actually Google Ads is essentially an auctioneer. Google is the auctioneer. And whenever you build a campaign, you're essentially providing eligibility to go to the auction. One of my favorite shows back in the day was Storage Wars. I don't know if it's still running. I haven't watched it in a while, but whenever I do things related to optimizing the campaigns for the auction, I always think to that of definitely one of my short-term, medium-term bucket list thing is to actually bid on a storage locker. But I'd like to think that some of my Google Ads optimizations is practice for that when that time comes. So anyways, tangent, going back to the Google Ads auction. How it works is that a user visits a site that shows ads, or it searches for something on Google. An auction is then instantly triggered behind the scenes, and different advertisers like us come to the auction with their ads, and Google decides which ads appear in what order. And then after that, the result is displayed to the user. And this all happens in a split second behind the scenes. So whenever you see sponsored posts or sponsored results and search results from a search, those auctions are happening behind the scenes in real time. So then how do we win that auction? Because it's all fine and good that auction occurs, but we want to show up as high as possible. And to do that, we have to win it. So what does that take? And there's a couple of factors at it, and we don't know the full story. Google is very good at being secretive about the actual mechanisms behind it, but yet telling us enough information to do us well, essentially. And so a lot of these things are verified by Google, and it's what Google claims is actually happening behind the scenes, but we don't know for sure how the auction works, the mechanisms behind it. It is somewhat of a black box, but we do know some of these components are really, really valuable because they are verified by Google. One is ad rank. This is kind of the collection of all the other ones that we're going to talk about. It's the combined score that determines your ad's position, and it's influenced by your bid, the quality of your ads, and the search intent of the users. Then we have the bid itself, which is the maximum amount that you're willing to pay for a click. That can be set manually by the advertiser, or it can be set by Google with automated bidding, which we'll talk about a bit later. Ad quality is really important. So how relevant or useful is your ad and website predicted to be for the user? So one thing to remember, and it's sometimes hard to keep into perspective, is that ultimately Google is a search engine. They're an advertising platform, but it's also a search engine. And the ultimate goal is it wants you as the searcher, as the customer, to find the results you're looking for. It wants to be the best search engine it can be. So it's not going to deliver an ad if it doesn't think that it's going to be relevant to the user and going to encourage the user to click on it. So you want to make sure that your ad and website is really relevant to the keywords you're targeting, because that will give Google the green light to be confident in actually delivering that ad to the user in search results. Then there's asset, expected impact. There's a bunch of different extensions or assets you can include. For example, you can add call extensions, site links, and all this stuff is really nice. We'll talk about it a bit more later on, but all this is really nice to actually increase your real estate and your impact in the search results. And all else equal, these assets can actually be a tiebreaker for Google. If you and a different advertiser are equal in all other things, but you include a call extension, you include a phone number, and your competitor doesn't, then Google could think, hey, this person really likes clicking on phone numbers. Let's display this person's ad instead. So asset expected impact maybe doesn't have as much value as ad rank, but it is still very valuable as a tiebreaker. Then there's ad context. This is the specific context of a user search. So where they're located, the time of day they're searching, the device they're using, all that's really valuable in determining our position in the auction. And then finally, auction competitiveness. So how many different competitors showed up? How many different advertisers came to the auction? If it's a very empty auction, you're going to be able to get the top of search results at a much cheaper clip. And if your ads are really, really strong and you show up at the top of search results, if you beat out a lot of competition, you're still going to have to pay more for that click because it is so competitive. So with that all in mind, I want to kind of put it into practice for you all and just do two scenarios. The first one is, let's just pretend that we're a small local retail shop with a very limited budget. And we want to just reach as many people as possible to drive local foot traffic to our location. Since our small bids will lower our ad rank, since we have a low budget, remember, we have a very limited budget, so we're naturally going to come to the table with smaller bids compared to some of our higher spending competitors. We have to compensate elsewhere. And the ways we can compensate, if you remember to the previous slide where we were showing all those different ways you can win at the auction, is to focus on highly targeted localized keywords, focusing on quality and context, optimizing your landing page, making sure everything is really polished and smoothed out. Additionally, you can choose to run your ads during only specific hours when your bakery is open or your restaurant is open or your shop is open. And that way you're making sure you're really consolidating your ad spend. One, so that you can actually bid higher on the most high impact keywords and the most high impact searches. And two, so that you can actually, have a higher ad rank and make sure it's relevant. So the outcome is you can still win these auctions even with small budgets by encouraging the ads to essentially deliver to the right people at the right time. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there's national e-commerce brand with a flexible budget. So here our resources will naturally give us a more favorable ad rank. We don't have to worry about bid because we have a dedicated advertising budget that will give us a lot of flexibility. So that allows us to experiment and cast a wider net than our competition. And we definitely want to leverage that and take advantage of it. For example, we can experiment with different ad formats, different ad types. You can leverage multiple different ad extensions. You can target high value customers through remarketing campaigns, target competitor search terms. You can do a lot of A/B testing. By really leveraging your budget, you can dominate more competitive auctions, test different strategies, and really gather valuable data that maybe smaller budget advertisers wouldn't be able to do. So this isn't to say that if you have a giant budget, you have the flexibility to lower your ad rank and push out worse ads. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you can have flexibility to experiment with new things and potentially fail and not sacrifice the overall efficacy of your campaigns. Okay. So next we're going to dive into the actual components of Google Ads campaigns. And if I go kind of fast through all of this, you can always revisit these slides as Shannon was saying. But I just wanted to briefly touch on some key components when you're actually building a Google Ads campaign and you're going through that process. And the first one that everyone cares about is budgets. Budget is important. It's money out of your pockets. And so this is a very important one for a lot of businesses and advertisers. The first key thing to keep in mind is Google Ads operates primarily on daily spend numbers. So that means that the amount you input into the campaign is going to be roughly what Google spends per day. There's a range, and it's not committed to only spending that amount. It can overspend or underspend. But at the end of the month, it will roughly spend your daily budget times 30.4. And the reason it's 30.4 is because on average, there's 30.4 days in the month. So that's the number it uses. So if you have a daily budget and you want to figure out what that monthly ad spend is, just multiply it by 30.4 and then give it a plus or minus 5 to 10%. And that'll give you a range for what you're looking for. If you have a really strict monthly budget that you have to hit, you can set thresholds. You can actually go into billing settings and set maximum budget thresholds. We do that for a lot of clients who have those strict monthly numbers. Some perspective on budget size. I get a lot of questions about, how much should I spend? What are your budget recommendations? And it varies. I think that there's no right answer here. And really the most important factor is how much is a lead or purchase worth to you? And how long can you realistically maintain that level of spending? So if, for example, a lead is $100 on average, it costs you to get a lead, and you're spending $10 a day, that's going to take 10 days, roughly, because 10 times 10 is 100. It's going to take roughly 10 days before you get a conversion, all else equal and all things looking good. And let's just say that lead costs you $100, but it's worth $50,000 to you, then you should not be spending $10 a day to get a $50,000 revenue lead. How long can you realistically maintain this level of spending is a big one too. If you have this set bucket of budget, I would rather you thin it out a bit and expand it over a year than just drive it home in 3 months. That gives you a lot more consistency. Consistency is actually really valuable in Google Ads, not just so we have the time to improve our campaigns, but also so that we can take advantage of seasonal trends. We can get year-over-year data. There's a lot of merit to actually having campaigns extend for a longer period of time, even if that means shrinking the budget on a daily or monthly basis. One other word of advice is just use Google's predictive tools to estimate your cost per click and cost per acquisition. That will give you an idea of how much a lead or a purchase will cost compared to the competition. Really, all of these findings can be, internally from your own business findings or actually using Google provided tools. Final piece, what's considered a low ad spend? I would say the bare minimum that you should consider spending is $10 a day. That is bare minimum. And this is an opinion thing. Again, this isn't a right answer or wrong answer. This is just an opinion. I think $10 a day is bare minimum, and you need to be able to scale that up to $50 a day or $1,500 a month, equivalent to move the needle. And I think that's a reasonable target for most businesses. And if these amounts aren't achievable, then you have to really do some soul searching and see if Google Ads is a good fit for your business. A lot of big advertisers consider anything under 10K a month as a small budget, but that's not realistic for the majority of businesses, especially small to medium size. Okay, so bidding strategies is the next piece, and there are many more bidding strategies than what we're going to talk about here. A lot of manual bidding, but I think for the purposes of this conversation, it's not really worth talking about some manual bidding strategies. One, because they're required more maintenance, and two, Google is increasingly steering away from manual bidding and focusing more on automated bidding strategies. So it is in Google's mind the way of the future, and it's effective enough in its current state that I think it's definitely worthwhile using, especially if you're building a new Google Ads campaign. There's a couple different bidding strategies to take into account. One is maximize clicks. So you set this and Google is going to go to the auction with whatever bid it thinks is going to maximize the number of clicks so you're going to get based on your budget. And then there's other features called smart bidding. And smart bidding is a Google AI driven feature. And you can see that table on the right. That shows the different forms of smart bidding. There's maximize conversions. And then the comma target CPA means you can set how much you want to spend for each conversion. And that will give Google a little more of a goalpost essentially to go in between. And that same thing also applies from a profit model. So you can say maximize the conversion value and set a target return on ad spend. So all this is a little complex. I think if you're starting out, starting at max clicks is good because you want to get some historical data of conversions rolling in before you actually switch it, because sometimes the system can get confused, right? I mean, if there's no historical data for any purchases, then it doesn't really know as well as it could about how to maximize those. So that's why generally setting, max clicks is good to start just briefly, and then transitioning to maximize conversions or maximize conversion value in the long run. Okay. Now, keyword research and targeting. Keywords, are a staple of digital ads, especially for search campaigns. It's a main targeting mechanism for search campaigns. Some things to consider. Consider user intent. Why are they searching? A keyword can mean different things if they're in the exploration phase or if they're actually trying to purchase something. Short tail versus long tail. The longer the keyword is, the less competitive it's going to be, but the lower the search volume. So sometimes it's a good thing to target, but if the search volume is too low, then Google is going to just struggle to deliver those ads. One other thing to consider is branded versus non-branded. Google thrives on wins, and branded keywords are really high converters, real high performers. So if you have an ad group with a bunch of keywords and one of them is your brand name in it, chances are Google is going to double down on that brand name and push that really hard. So you want to isolate those branded keywords into either a separate campaign or even a separate ad group with some sort of budget allocation so that you don't spend as much on branded keywords as maybe some of the other more competitive ones that are non-branded. And really, unless you're running enterprise level, unless you're an agency like us, you can get all that you need to know out of the free tools that Google provides. Google has a keyword planner in there that really has all of the search volume and competitive metrics you need to find the right keywords for your campaigns. And actually a lot of other tools like SEMrush actually pulls their keyword volume data from the Google API. So really you're seeing the same information just packaged a little differently. There are clear benefits for why you would want to use SEMrush, especially if you're working at the scale like we are. But for an individual Google Ads account, it's not needed. You don't need to be spending money on all those extra tools. So one other thing I want to mention on this is consider the different keyword match types. For example, if we do keyword furniture store, you can do broad match, phrase match, or exact match. And broad match is the widest one. You're kind of letting go of the leash and letting Google find other keywords that are similar to the one that you put down. Phrase match gives them a little wiggle room. It's a happy medium. And exact match is very strict. So it has to include that keyword. And so it's valuable to keep that in mind because for tighter budgets, you want to focus on maybe a lower quantity of more specific keywords to maximize ROI. And so broad match might not be the one for you, because with broad match, Google is going to be very experimental and go and try to find peripheral keywords that you didn't put down. And broad match is really, really strong, but you need to use negative keywords and you need to monitor the search term report because it can also target some irrelevant keywords. Whereas for phrase match or exact match, there's less margin for error there. I would recommend starting out. Phrase match is usually a pretty good medium there, but it varies based on the industry and what the keyword data is showing. Okay, next is ads and assets. A lot of this stuff is, I wouldn't say common knowledge, at least for the creative and extensions piece. But there are some pieces that are very unique to Google Ads that are not like traditional marketing. A big one is copy. You have to make sure it always aligns with keywords in your landing page messaging, and you have to treat it differently from traditional marketing copy, because not only are you limited by 30 characters or less for headlines, 90 characters or less, you increase an ad rank when your keywords align with what the user is searching and with what's on the landing page. So it's a little different than when you're just writing traditional copy. You want to have a lot of diversity in your headlines. You want it to be to the point, concise, compelling, and you want to directly address user intent. Creative images and videos are extremely important, but not every format is supported in every campaign. I would say that if you have the capability of including images and videos, you absolutely should. There really isn't an issue where not including them is the right path forward. So you definitely want to include that, because a lot of the times people buy with their eyes and buy with their ears. So you really want to make sure that those creative assets are up to snuff. And then finally, those extensions we're talking about, these extensions are good because they increase your real estate in the search results. So site links, you can show different alternative links. You can have a lead form there in the search results. You can have a call extension. And if you get placed at the top of search results, it expands your search result your ad. So it actually pushes the competition lower down the page. So they're really valuable in that sense. Okay. Then the website and the landing pages, mobile, you absolutely want to make sure that your website operates well on mobile. It's not uncommon to see 75% plus traffic coming from mobile devices for Google Ads. You're really doing yourself a disservice if you only QA and you only optimize for desktop users. This percentage will differ based on the industry, but there's a real good chance that a chunk of your users are going to be coming in from mobile. And then you have to ask the question, does it match the messaging in your ads? Again, I'm driving the point home. It has to align. All the ads, the keywords, the search intent, right? All of this has to align with your landing page, not only because that's a direct prerequisite of Google for competitiveness in the auction, but also subconsciously that helps us as users, as buyers to see, yes, this is what I searched for, this is what I'm looking for, and it'll improve conversion rates on the site. Because ultimately, you know, Google Ads can only get people to the site. It's up to your website to actually convert them. So you really are doing your ads a disservice if you neglect the website. Be sure to role play as your audience. Don't be afraid to click on your ads. I know it can cost a little bit of money, but it's really pennies if you think about it. And you really want to follow the exact user experience. Be sure, you know, if you're running e-commerce, be sure to follow the checkout process, make a purchase, especially on phone. How seamless is it? Is there any friction anywhere? Is there any stages that users would abandon carts? Is there a clear CTA and next step, especially for B2B businesses with where lead forms are on the site? Is it intuitive? You know, is it easy to navigate? It's really important, and it indirectly and directly it impacts the ads performance. Finally, add specific landing pages to build or not to build. I would say if you have the capability to build landing pages specifically for the ads, you absolutely should, but they aren't needed. We've had a lot of success driving traffic to the homepage or to a contact page, to a service page. So I wouldn't waste too much time on this if you don't have the resources to do both at the same time, you know, build and optimize Google Ads and work on the website at the same time. If you have to prioritize, then ad specific landing pages can be, you know, something you can maybe push on the back burner. Okay. So now it's a water break here, and then we're going to talk about benchmarks and KPIs and conversion tracking. This stuff is honestly, a lot of people find this boring. I find this super interesting, this part, and it is probably one of the most important pieces of it, because if this gets broken, your ads are not going to convert. So excellent. Okay. So like I said, if you don't have conversion tracking working, you're not going to get conversions. Your ads aren't going to convert. If you don't have tracking for purchases, I can spend $1,000 on your website. Google Ads are going to think that it's a bunch of losers because it didn't get any positive feedback. Google Ads thrives on wins. So the more positive feedback, the more data you can send to it, the faster it's going to optimize and the faster performance is going to improve. I had a friend who actually runs just a little tiny e-commerce store on the side talk to me about conversion tracking. He's not the most technical person, and he said, you know, I think that there's duplicate conversion tracking on my website and purchases are getting double counted. And he asked if that's something that is worth looking into or fixing. And the answer is a resounding yes, because think about it. If you're worried about duplicate conversions, fixing that and having performance drop, then why wouldn't you just add a third conversion tracking tag, have purchases count a third time, and have conversions increase by 50%? You might as well. You could add 10 purchase tags on the website, have purchases fire 10 times, and it'll look great. But that's not the point. You don't want it to look great. The point is you want to give accurate data to Google Ads so it knows which users are converting, what those wins are, how much those wins are worth, and then how to continue getting that. So you want to make sure that that's really, really accurate. And, you know, attribution in general for marketing is really important, especially so for Google Ads. I find that this is a source of a lot of friction, especially for B2B sales and marketing teams. A lot of the friction that happens between sales and marketing comes from a lack of attribution. If a user clicks on an ad, views a page, fills out a form, sales reaches out to them, and then they become a client, who gets credit along the way? You know, maybe sales said 2 words to them, then that would be a credit that would go higher up the funnel. Maybe ads would get more credit, whereas maybe they came a little more skeptical and sales actually converted them. And that's really valuable to to map out, so you can accurately get those conversion metrics going. And really that applies for Google Ads too, not just for marketing and sales. For e-commerce, this is easy. You can set up purchase tracking through a lot of your tools like WooCommerce or Shopify. For lead gen, it gets a little more tricky because you actually have to pick out, somewhere at the bottom of the funnel to count and value as a conversion, and usually that's going to be lead forms. Okay. So for benchmarks and KPIs, it really all ties back to, how do we measure success? How do we know that this is working? And the, kind of the tough answer is, success is subjective. The first question you have to ask is, what do I want these ads to achieve? And then you have to set really clear goals and establish realistic timelines for that. So, if you want to prime a new market for your sales team to enter, then maybe impressions, reach, click-through rate, and page engagement is going to be more valuable than actually getting them to convert, because maybe your conversion action is going to be offline and it's going to be the sales team job, right? Or maybe it is just purchases, and then you don't care necessarily so much about page metrics as long as they convert and you can generate sales. And then finally, you don't want to quit. You want to experiment, even if results aren't looking great, because ultimately having a marketing growth mindset involves failing in new ways each time. So if something doesn't work, then making note of that, changing it, and then if it fails again, make sure that something else fails. And that's really how you improve these things and get to that return on ad spend that's required to actually make your ads profitable. Okay, continuing on. These are some ideas for key benchmarks. Again, it'll differ for every business. One is click-through rate. So which percentage of users who saw your ad actually clicked on it? That's a valuable metric, a lot for brand awareness, especially. Cost per click. How much money are you spending per click, and is it worth it to you? The conversion rate, obviously. Cost per conversion, or cost per acquisition, as Google calls it, or cost per conversion value, return on ad spend. So the cost per conversion value is the one I want to talk about the most. You have to use conversion values even if there isn't one innately tied to the action. For e-commerce, you don't have to worry about this. A purchase has a set dollar amount. That's money in your pocket. But for lead gen, it's a bit different for B2B, because how much is the average client worth? If they submit a form and they're considered a sales qualified lead, that's not actually money in your pocket, but these ads should still get credit for that. And you kind of have to do some math to set conversion values. Google lets you set conversion values for non-purchase conversions. So you can value a lead format, for example, $500. And you can do this by just estimating how much an average client is worth to you, figuring out the conversion rate for the conversion action. So for example, let's just say out of all the people that submitted this form on my website, 5% of them turned into customers. Then just take 5% of the average amount that one customer is worth to you, and you can set that as the average value for a form submission. And this is a good starting point, and as long as it's revisited and updated regularly, this is going to be accurate enough to generate results, and it will absolutely be better than not having conversion values at all. Because one of the key automated bidding strategies that you can use, value-based bidding, depends on those values being set. And so you're doing yourself, again, a disservice if you don't do this. Okay. Perfect. And then just as a little capstone here, I'm kind of treating this as a conclusion. Just remember that Google is a business. Google's revenue model is, over 70% of their revenue comes from Google Ads. So it is in Google's best interest to derive value in the form of Google Ads revenue. So they're going to get you to spend as much money as you can. And ultimately, even if their tools and suggestions can be valuable, which they very much can be, a lot of them are also designed with this goal in mind. One example is if you go into the recommendations tab on Google Ads, you can see a common recommendation is raise your budgets, but they don't have a lower your budget recommendation. And they do that for a reason. Another thing is, have healthy skepticism of Google account representatives. They'll reach out to you and want to kind of audit your account. It's a free service, and I would encourage you to have conversations with them. I talk with them as a paid search manager. I have a lot of calls with Google account representatives, but something to keep in mind is they make more money when you spend more money. So a lot of the times their recommendation is going to be to spend more money, but you have to pick through that and actually get to the real insights, because I've learned a lot of great things from Google account representatives, but they will always lead off with, you got to raise your budgets, and that won't always apply for your business. So I would say the key word there is healthy skepticism, that you definitely don't want to neglect the recommendations. You don't want to take everything that the Google representatives say with a grain of salt, but you definitely want to critically evaluate it and know that ultimately Google is a for-profit business that wants to spend more, or wants you to spend more money. So it's important to keep that in mind. Okay.
Thank you so much, Joey, for that presentation. I know you spread a wealth of knowledge to everyone, as I said, even introducing this, but you really are an expert, and it is a pleasure to be able to pick your brain about these items. So I know we covered a lot today, but do not worry. As I said in the beginning, we will be sharing access to this slide deck and the recording straight to your email within the next week. We will also have it posted on our website. So if you would like to be able to share it with your network, you'll be able to share access pretty easily. Before we go into our Q&A session, I would just like to say, if you want more time with Joey, if you would like a one-on-one session where he is specifically looking at your ads account or helping you establish what those goals and that strategy is, you can book a one-on-one custom paid ads consulting session with Joey. So that gives you 60 minutes to discuss whatever areas are most important to you, to either review those existing ads or discuss launching a new campaign. The session will be recorded and shared afterwards, so you're able to reference that down the road at any point or share it with the rest of your team. And if you move into a monthly paid ads retainer after having gone through this session with Joey within 90 days, you will receive 50% off the setup month of your program. So if you're interested in doing this, it's $650 flat fee for that session and recording. You will have to have access given to us, administrative access for your GA4 or paid ads account, just so we can take a look in there and be able to have a productive phone call. And if you would like to set this up or inquire about the details of it, you can email our account manager, Ryan Weidman, at ryan@evolve-systems.com. So let's dive into some questions. Let's ask Joey about ads. If you'd like to submit any questions in the chat, you can. Otherwise, I'm also getting a couple of emails from people that had to drop off that would like us to answer a few questions. So the chat should now be open. Joey, to kick us off, you did mention negative keywords at one point. Can you explain a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, sure. So negative keywords are kind of a really valuable tool to use, especially for broad match. How it works is you build a list. Essentially, you can go into Google Ads. I believe it's the asset library, or it's a tool somewhere in there where you can upload a negative keyword list, and you put keywords in there. You can do phrase match, broad match, exact match, much in the same way that you do it if you're actually targeting those keywords. And what it tells Google is to, if there's any searches that include those keywords using those match types, then your ads are not eligible for those searches. So, one example could be, let's just say you're looking to find businesses who are looking to hire maybe somebody, like you're an executive search, for example, and you're trying to find businesses that are looking for new executives. A lot of your keywords are going to be related to jobs, employment. And so some negative keywords you would include would be like looking for, searching for a job, because you don't want to show up for searches of people who are unqualified or actually candidates applying. So that's an example of something. And it's really important to look at your search terms reports, because then you can actually directly add those keywords that show up in your search terms reports into your negative keyword lists. If you use exact match or phrase match, then negative keywords lists are not as important as broad match, because broad match, you completely let go of the leash and let Google be very experimental. And a lot of the times it finds good opportunities, but sometimes it doesn't. And it's important to monitor that. But it's always good to include a lot of top of funnel keyword, or a lot of top of journey keywords, questions that maybe aren't transactional. It could be another example. And you can include one word, you can include phrases. Google has some really good resources on and examples on what would trigger or what wouldn't too. So
do you have any recommendations? You talked about how having video and imagery in your ads is really important because we are visual learners. Is it more impactful to choose one or the other, or is there any difference in the two?
no, that's a good question. So it depends on the campaign type. A lot of the times Google will let you do both. So if you do a search campaign, which is the most traditional Google Ads campaign type that a lot of people think of, then you can upload images, but it doesn't really do videos. A display campaign, YouTube, for example, that's very video forward. A display campaign has a mix of both. And then the new campaign type that Google's pushing is Performance Max, which I definitely encourage you to look into. I didn't want to dive too deep into Performance Max because there's a lot of differences between that and the rest of different Google Ads campaign types. So it would almost necessitate me making a separate section dedicated to Performance Max in this webinar. But with Performance Max, it allows you to deliver ads across all different platforms. So Gmail, YouTube, search results on websites, the display network. And in those instances, you can do images and videos at the same time. Something worth noting is you don't need to actually upload videos for Performance Max campaigns. What will happen is if you don't include videos, Google will create them automatically for you. And you can see those in the asset details and see the performance report of actually how those Google automatically created videos are. They won't be as good as something that you would create, but they're good enough because ultimately even mediocre video is better than no video. It's very engaging. People can engage and interpret video and images a lot quicker than they can with reading, and it catches their eye very, very strongly. So it's important to include that. And I guess the one final thing I'll add is you don't need stunning, beautiful, professionally done images. Google has a stock library you can use too. I know it may not align too much with your brand, and coming from a PPC person who is so data driven like that, it may not be something that you want to hear, but it's the same thing with video too. Just something is better than nothing, especially since Google takes into account those assets when determining ad rank.
Perfect. You said in the beginning that ad results are not instant, but are quick. So when can you typically expect to see some results from an ad campaign?
Yeah. Again, it varies. The learning period, Google, when you set a bidding strategy and create a campaign, Google's learning period can be 10 to 14 days, maybe. It's not a set number, but that's a rough range. And that's where it kind of learns. It gets its beat under it. So I would say after 2 to 3 weeks, you should start seeing things come together. It depends on how competitive it is, how much money you're spending, and really the product that you're spending too. Because if you're selling, for example, fingerboards or fidget spinners or something that's a low average order value, you're going to be able to see results a lot faster than if you're selling courses that are worth thousands of dollars, as an example. So it can vary. And if you spend a lot of money, then you can accelerate that learning period, because the thing that advances the learning process is delivering the ad and measuring results. So the more times that you can deliver that ad, the faster it's going to learn. I would say definitely give it 1 to 3 months before you start making the tough decisions. That again, it varies, but I would say, after a month or two, you should definitely start seeing at least some traction.
And if you're running your ad campaign for a full year, where you said, thin out your budget and spread it over the year, if that's possible for you, how often should you be looking at that ad or changing that ad?
Yeah, so I would say it depends how well it's performing. If it's performing well, if performance is improving on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, you could check it, every 2 weeks. I like looking at things at least once a week, only to make sure if it's on track for spending. But you don't need to go in there and change things frequently. And actually, a lot of the times it's better to let it sit for 2, 3 weeks, a month, to give it more time to figure out if it's working. If you change too much too fast, you can be at risk of actually pushing the campaign back into the learning phase, which will drop results. So it is kind of a delicate balance that you want to manage. Definitely once a month at least, but I would probably check it every other week at the minimum. But you really shouldn't be changing too much, especially from like a bidding strategy or an assets perspective on a monthly basis, week-to-week basis.
If you have a really healthy budget, does it make more sense to throw it all into a single campaign or a single targeted goal, or does it make more sense to spread that out into multiple campaigns that are aiming at different areas for your business?
Yeah. So factors that would would influence my answer here would be, what's your geographic scope. I think one way to look at it, maybe not so much as how much budget you have, but you should look at it on how many different objectives you have and how unique are the things that you're trying to advertise. So, for example, if you are, let's just say you're selling to users in Minnesota and in Texas, chances are that there's a good amount of customization that you can do to better resonate with users in Texas than in Minnesota. So one thing you could do is you could separate the campaign by a geographic region. Another thing you could do is separate the campaigns if you're selling a certain product category versus another. For example, one thing I like doing is if I'm running a shopping campaign and one product category is performing really well, then I'll pull that out and isolate it and give it its own dedicated campaign with its own budget, and then exclude it from that existing campaign where it was kind of hogging all the budget. So that way Google knows, okay, we can keep generating revenue for this one that clearly works, and then also give some love to these other ones that it isn't going to favor because it really does thrive on those wins, and it'll double down on that. In terms of number of campaigns, I would say I wouldn't spread it out too much, but you definitely, if you have the budget, you definitely want to try different campaign types, mix and match. I think one thing I found a lot of success with is having one search campaign and one performance max campaign. They do work together and uplift each other in the performance department. But it can be one with all the budget. It could be 5, 6, 7. I wouldn't go too much more over that unless you're spending that 10K a month. I wouldn't go into double digits of campaigns, definitely. But really, if it works, then who am I to tell you that it's wrong, right? If whatever you do, if it works, then it works, and it really is up to your users to decide.
So it sounds like that's where that experimentation mindset comes in, where you want to be testing things.
Exactly.
How is someone with a smaller budget able to do some of that same experimentation and testing without blowing the entire budget on things that they're not certain of?
Right. It's definitely that's one of the tougher tests you have to do. That is what makes it really tricky to run Google Ads on a low budget, and really you just have to be really strict. There has to be no love lost when it comes to cutting things. So maybe you have multiple ad groups with different keyword categories. If for a week or two Google is really favoring delivering to one and it's not delivering to the others, just turn the others off. Really, when you're working on that low budget, you have to cut some corners in the experimentation department, but you can still run sort of pseudo experiments. So again, if you have a low budget, I would work with phrase match, probably. Not a formal recommendation, but I guess that would just be side advice, because phrase match ensures that you're not, Google isn't going completely off in left field, targeting keywords that aren't going to be relevant, but it will try and find some things that maybe you didn't think of. And so that way you can maybe see in the search terms report, hey, this is a keyword that I like, let's add this one. And then you can turn off ones that don't have good results. But really, when it comes down to it, you have such a finite budget to work with. You're going to want to be really ruthless when it comes to axing certain keywords or certain ads. But don't axe things too quickly. I know it's kind of wishy-washy, but if you don't exit the learning period and give it ample time, then you'll also be setting yourself back.
Sounds like there is a lot of strategy that can go into managing your ads and maintaining your ads. Is that something where you recommend having a dedicated seat on your team or an agency partner, or is that something where I can task my marketing manager to take this on?
Yeah, so it's tough because Google Ads is something that can degrade pretty quickly if you neglect it. So you need some due diligence and some consistency to actually prune it, I guess. When it comes to delegating, you don't want to. Google Ads is relatively beginner friendly, but something to keep in mind is that it's always, if you're not doing this for a living, it's always going to be suboptimal. That's just the way it is. I mean, even PPC experts, even people that do this for a living, make mistakes when it comes to this stuff. Whether it's 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, something's going to go wrong. You're going to make a mistake. And so as long as you keep that in mind, if you don't have the money to invest in somebody dedicated to PPC, your best bet is to do something fractional, partner with an agency or something like that. Even if you can't do that, then you can run ads, just delegating it internally. But I wouldn't do that if there's somebody who's not going to be able to check on it a lot. It's not a set and forget thing, because the next thing you know, it could be 3 months down the line and you forget about it and you spent, a couple $1,000s that you're not going to get back. So as long as somebody is monitoring it, taking insights, improving upon it, actually taking that data and improving your entire marketing mix with it, then it's worthwhile and you can definitely delegate, but definitely be careful.
Okay. And if my ads campaign is not performing the way that I want it to, is it smarter for me to shut off the campaign or to spend time refining it?
Yeah. So the first question you definitely want to ask is my conversion tracking working? So I'm assuming when that question is asked, when they say not working, it means conversions aren't coming in. They could mean something else, but that's my assumption since they didn't specify what they meant by not working. So if conversions aren't coming in, the first thing I always do is check to make sure the conversions are working. So you can go in and use the Google Tag Assistant extension. You can go to the conversions tab in Google Ads and actually test them there. So I would use the Google Tag Assistant and just make sure that they're active. If they are working, then I would definitely try to do some, tweaks to try something different. If things, if you did that and things still aren't going well, you could try something more drastic, like, completely different messaging, completely different keywords, turning off high spending keywords if they're not converting. But chances are there's somewhere along the line that isn't resonating with your users. I would definitely pay attention to GA4, going to analytics and seeing where this paid traffic is arriving and where they're falling off. If, for example, you have a really high click-through rate, which means a lot of people are clicking on the ads, but then they kind of read that one page and then bounce, then chances are the ads aren't the problem, and chances are that landing page is the problem. So before turning the campaign off, you want to revisit all of those different slides about the elements of a Google Ads campaign, bidding strategy, keywords, assets. Try tweaking all of those first, and if you're doing that and you can't see any results there, then it's never a wrong decision to turn off ads, because ultimately it is your money and your marketing budget, and the end goal is to spend that marketing budget in a way that advances your company the most. And so don't feel bad or anything if you do turn it off, but just know that very rarely is there an instance where there's a lost cause. Chances are that if something's not converting, something's going wrong somewhere along the line.
You talked a lot about the marketing versus sales piece of it and making sure that there's that attribution to the right areas. Who should be involved in planning my strategies and deciding which goals we're targeting and how we're measuring those?
Yeah, I think it's a group effort. The person who has, if anybody has a big picture of the entire funnel, I think here's another thing is I think it's important that marketing and sales collaborates on this, because you have to work with sales because first of all, it's whoever has the most insight and capabilities when it comes to the CRM or actually managing those leads, and then connecting the dots with more of the website or the analytics, the marketing side. So I think you have to pull in multiple hats here. But again, like, if the numbers don't look good, if you're still seeing things that you believe are providing value to your business, then it justifies continuing on. So for example, if you go into and you create your first Google Ads campaign saying, I just want to get more people to the website, then conversions, maybe, you still want to optimize for them in the long run, but maybe they're not as important in the short term. That isn't always the case. A lot of people just want to get those conversions. So when there's actually, one of the toughest things is, after that form submission, it's kind of hazy on where that lead comes from. If you're operating with a CRM that can link with Google Ads, definitely do that. You can also upload offline conversion data to kind of match it with conversions, but Google Ads uses something called data-driven attribution. So you'll see 2.45 conversions, and that's where it actually distributes credit along like the digital path to all the different. So that number there is something to work with. And when you're combining that with sales, you just want to say, okay, here's the number of leads that came in, here's the number of people that converted. Let's retrace our steps and see where these people came from. And if something came from the ads, then you distribute the success accordingly there.
Thank you so much, Joey. That is bringing us perfectly to the end of our webinar. So once again, we really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge with us. And if anybody would like to learn more from Joey, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, this deck will be coming to you via email within the next week. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day, weekend, and month.